All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll give you an introduction really quickly of our speaker. Dr. Crystal Kalinec Craig is an assistant professor of curriculum and instruction at the University of Texas at San Antonio in the Department of Interdisciplinary Learning and Teaching. She earned her doctorate in teaching and teacher education at the University of Arizona in 2012. Dr. Kalinec Craig teaches and coordinates courses in elementary and middle grades mathematics methods. Her research examines inequities in mathematics education and teacher preparation. The Rights of the Learner serves as a cornerstone in how she helps teachers open more opportunities for children to participate and to develop positive mathematical identities. Dr. Kalinec Craig will serve as a co-principal investigator to a new Department of Education Title V grant called Community Math Project, Building Math Proficiency to Strengthen Teacher Education Through Collaborative Interventions. Her most recent work has been featured in the journals of Democracy and Education and the Journal of Technology and Teacher Education. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kalinec Craig.
Thank you. How long do I have? Because I will talk for a long time.
Clock, so
45 minutes and then, or 50 minutes and then 10 to 15 minutes for questions.
Perfect.
All right.
All right. Welcome. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to listen to me engage with you on ideas that I've been thinking about for quite some time. First, I always like to just give you my stance, my positionality, my background, because I feel like that's important as we engage in the ideas about the rights of the learner. So I'm from Texas, but I'm a military brat and I moved around a whole bunch. So I've taught everywhere from North Carolina and Mississippi to Arizona, Germany, back to Arizona, and now Texas. So I kind of bring that lens. I was initially prepared to be a middle school and a high school math teacher, and I taught that for 5 years. And then I went to the University of Arizona, and I learned a great deal about elementary mathematics, and I learned about how elementary mathematics, as Randy Phillips says, is not elementary. There's a lot of depth that comes with that. So I really had my eyes open in my doc program. And so right now I primarily do the elementary math methods at UTSA. The other thing that I'm also realizing in the course of my studies with my doc program, and then now I just submitted my tenure packet a couple of weeks ago, so is that I'm looking more at internalizing, or not internalizing, but looking more at the internal natures of the ways in which my racial identity really informs my practice and how I can use that to interrupt issues of inequity that happen. So I know that I have privilege whenever I speak from a place such as the University of Georgia, and that I can use my research and my teaching and my service to go ahead and interrupt those moments of inequities. So just to kind of give you a background, if this was Craig in a nutshell, I am a descendant of CGI. So Tom Carpenter was my academic great-grandfather. And Martha Seville was on my committee, so I bring funds of knowledge. I'm very much a part of the complex instruction group, and so I bring that to my background. And then whenever I was learning how to be a mathematics teacher educator in Tucson, Arizona, because of the Samela project, I wasn't working with Samela, but I was working tangentially is whenever I learned about the rights of the learner. So it's these four pieces that really kind of integrate and present the ways in which I look at mathematics teacher education. But first, we got to get something on the table right now. I've already told multiple people about this. Your dog Brandon Gabe is on point here at the University of Georgia. This is the picture in the elevator, and I texted this to everybody last night. As a Texas A&M grad, I just have to say congratulations on being a 4-0. Alabama was a really hard type of lesson for us to learn every year. But the reason why I actually picked this picture, and it was kind of a little bit in terms of just spontaneous, is because I like the legacy in the background, where you can see all the other UGAs. I actually texted this picture to a friend of mine who's a very staunch Georgia fan. And he's like, finally, Crystal's at a good school. And this is how it's going to go. I was like, you got a cute dog. Anyway, but it's in terms of legacy because we're going to talk about CGI and about using video clips. And so for me, in thinking about the long history of CGI and funds of knowledge and the rights of the learner and strength-based approaches, I kind of felt like that was an apt picture. And also, if you know me, I love cats and dogs. But so I'm just going to put the dogs up here. So turn to the person next to you. When you look at this picture, what does it remind you of? Are there memories that come to your head whenever you think about these class rules? So turn to the person next to you and just talk briefly for about 30 seconds.
That follows directions. I think that paper that's given out that says do all of these things. And the principal says right click, so then all of these elementary students are measuring the doorknob, doing all of these different tasks, when really if they read all the instructions, they would have not read it.
All right, so let's take a pause. As somebody who's prepared as a middle school and a high school teacher, I don't have like all of the elementary tricks in terms of getting people back together, so I just kind of, I give you looks. Does somebody want to go ahead and share what they thought of whenever they saw these rules?
We said, like, on the first day of school, your teacher stands up and points to the rules and tells you this is how we're going to engage with each other in class.
Okay. These may be rules that you might have seen in schools. This is kind of one of those ones that you can just print out and throw up on your wall. What if you see something like this? Has anybody seen the stoplights? Red, yellow, green? Yeah. If you look at like green behaviors, you talk in a quiet voice. You use your inside voice. You keep your hands and your feet to yourself, and you comply with directions. Like this is implying a notion of power and oppression against students in classrooms. I mean, even the red behaviors do not talk. So in what ways might this stifle students from talking if they see that I always want to be on the green because I want to go, I want to be able to go ahead and learn and be in the good graces of the teacher, that there are already implications of how students are supposed to act in classrooms just based on the things that we put up on our walls. And so a little bit of the rights of the learner as I talk about it. So I didn't come up with the rights of the learner, and I will never, ever, ever stand and say that I did. But I learned it from Olga Torres. And she's an amazing mathematics teacher educator and a teacher that's in Tucson, Arizona, bilingual, elementary, third grade teacher. And she knew that her students needed to be able to express what they were thinking in their head in her classroom. And instead of just saying, share with me your thinking, she needed to position her students in a way that they knew that they had the right to say what made sense to them, and not just to wait for her to expect them to go ahead and share their thinking. So the first and foremost, she wanted to create a safe space for her students. And in order to do that, she had to create this notion of rights in a classroom for her students to exercise, and not just rules for them to follow. So she reimagined her classroom rules to be these rights that were unalienable, that were inherent, that were always going to be there no matter if she was there or if she wasn't. So this was, y'all remember Schoolhouse Rock? Okay, so think about like the ways in which students can exercise those rights in multiple different ways. And it wasn't just in math classes, it was also in science, it was also in social studies, it was in reading. And she found that by helping her students to be able to exercise their rights, she was learning more about their thinking. And when she learned more about the students' thinking, then she was able to extend that thinking even more. So let's get into the rights. This is where I get all my memes, all my gifts. I told you they're coming. The cat one's coming soon. All right, so the first one, you have the right to be confused. As a teacher, you have the right to, or as a student, you have the right to engage in productive struggle. You have the right that if I put up a problem up on the board and you give me that look, that is your fundamental right to go, I don't understand. You just need to stop it right now. Hang on. We can also re-envision this as productive struggle, for you to engage in a problem and a task where you might not necessarily know the answer right away, but you can approach it through multiple entry points. You have the right to claim a mistake and revise your thinking. I love this because I feel like sometimes this is my life all the time. I have made a huge, tiny mistake. And whenever you claim a mistake and you get to revise your thinking, then you get to take another path in that thinking. And you're not necessarily predetermined to always have this one mathematical identity that's defined by that mistake. And this also actually ties in really nicely with if you've ever read Mandy Jansen's work about rough draft talk, rough draft thinking, where every time you talk, you always have another opportunity to add another layer onto that thinking. And you can revise it over and over and over again, so where you can get a much more finalized draft. But notice that I say the word claim instead of make. Initially it was make a mistake, and what I would find is that a lot of teachers, whenever I would talk about the rights of the learners with students, they would say, well, students, you have the right to make a mistake. And they would come up, and if they would notice that a student has made a mistake on their paper, they would say, oh, look, everybody, you made a mistake. And that changed the dynamics when the teachers named the mistake as opposed to the students claiming a mistake. So I try to avoid the word saying mistake in my class as a teacher because that exercises a certain power over my students. But I'll let my students say it all the time. Like, whoop, made a mistake, didn't want to do that. Cool, that's because that's your head as to where you're at right now with your thinking. You have the right to speak, listen, and be heard. And this is really important for students who are learning how to communicate their thinking in multiple languages. If they don't have the right to be able to speak in whatever way that they need to communicate their mathematical thinking, then again, we're applying a certain particular way that we want to hear them talk. And you have the right to write, do, and represent what makes sense to them. And that even means writing down, I am pretending to write something down. Do, 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 do. That's cool, because at least you're writing something down. And that's your right. This also ties back a lot to this notion that mathematics is not a universal language, that there's different ways that we can write math symbols, there's different ways that we can have algorithms, and if students step into a space of being able to communicate their thinking and write things down that make sense to them, then that, as teachers, affords us more opportunities to understand where they're coming from. But with these rights come some pretty serious limitations. And that's where the balance of the rights of the learner are, is that you don't have the right to be a racist. You don't have the right to be a sexist. You don't have the right to promote bigotry or ableism, or to have judgments based on religion, gender, sexual orientation. Nobody has the right to dehumanize somebody else. So you don't get a right to be a plastic, kind of like in Mean Girls. Am I pulling from like good memes? I don't even know. I can't judge your faces right now. Are we okay? Okay. Nobody gets the right to be a plastic, or kind of a Michael Scott, because I've also been watching some episodes of The Office, but you know he has some redeeming qualities eventually. But you don't have the right to dehumanize another human being. And that's something that I've had to really learn in terms of being a math teacher educator, is whenever I have my pre-service teachers say, yeah, but those kids, their parents just don't care about education. Those kids, like, they don't speak English, so maybe I need to teach them English before I can teach them mathematics. Like, you don't have the right to say that, because that's dehumanizing another human being. So it's really tricky sometimes in terms of the spaces that I work in with my students. So how can teachers use the rights of the learner to go ahead and support strength-based pedagogies, thinking about students' strengths as opposed to their deficits, what they do know versus what they don't know, students' mathematical learning, and students' positive mathematical identities. So kind of coming all back to the four corners that inform my ideas. So I try to pair up the rights of the learner with this notion that Pryor and Crusade talk about in terms of convergent and divergent formative assessment. So convergent formative assessment says there is a right answer and there is a wrong answer. It is correct or it is incorrect. There is no coloring outside the lanes. So that's why I picked stay in your lane, okay? Whenever you are convergent formative assessment, you are only looking to see if the student knows something, not the vast landscape of what they do know. Divergent formative assessment is you're looking at the landscape of what they know. So if you see that there might be multiple answers. So this is where complex instruction really helps me out in terms of emphasizing the rights of the learner, because you can come up with a group-worthy task that has multiple different entry points so that you can see kids are doing all this math in their head, and then it's just an opportunity to tell them, you have the right to be able to like share all that cool thinking with me, because your answer may be different than your answer, may be different than your answer, may be different than your answer. But that still gives me a whole lot more information than if I was just saying, you gotta just stay in your lane, just give me that one answer. This is kind of freaking me out, because I'm seeing my like presentation on all these screens. I'm like, those are some really good gifts I picked out. Good job, right? All right, so I propose, what if we as teachers intentionally put our fingers on the scale to go ahead and create classrooms that are equitable, so that we help our students to be able to position themselves as having these fundamental rights as learners. So where we can encourage more students to share their thinking and to be identified as valuable contributors, not just waiting for the teacher to be able to tell them, but that they can already exercise those rights and step into that space. So, this is the whole point, is how do we have this play out in a mathematics methods classroom? And how do pre-service teachers learn to adopt the rights of the learner? So, if y'all know me, I like cats. I also like dogs, but I put a lot of cat memes. There's at least one cat meme in each one of my presentations, and a lot of my students, I'm actually surprised I don't hear like groans in the audience right now, because my students do that all the time. They're like, oh. But that's a cute cat though, right? Like the mustache cat? No, okay, we have some dog people in here, that's okay. All right, so what I'm gonna go ahead and present today is some work that I've actually been doing with Dr. Diamond as a part of the STAR cohort in 2014, and we call it the CGI Playlist Process Innovation. And it started from the three of us, Dr. Diamond, Dr. Shi at UNLV, and myself. We got together on the core premise that we all use CGI in our methods classroom. And we wanted to look and see the ways in which, what pre-service teachers noticed whenever they watched a particular CGI video. And after we engaged in that, and we got our work published, so that was amazing work, we went ahead and took it a step further and said, well, we kind of, whenever we talk about the videos that we use in terms of CGI, we in some cases pick different videos. And sometimes for the same reason, and for other moments for different reasons. And so let's play this out and let's see the ways in which we pick these videos. So instead of just like showing everybody the videos that we use, we said we're just gonna go ahead and pick your top 6. Like if you remember back in the 80s, you had the mixtape that you wanted to go ahead and give your best crush. You wouldn't go ahead and give them like a huge compilation of like 8 cassette tapes. That would be way too long. You just gotta pick those really nice songs that you just wanted them to go ahead and listen to. So think about that in terms of CGI. So what are the top 6 video clips that we play in our classrooms with our method students that really emphasize the foundational core principles that we try to promote in our classrooms? And then we created a rationale document about why we selected them and the ways in which we use them. And then we shared our playlist amongst ourselves, and we had a really nice discussion. And then in doing that, we then reflected back on the videos that we picked and thought, well, in what ways might I go ahead and incorporate the videos that Dr. Diamond uses or the ones that Dr. Shi uses, and how can that really inform my practice or where I can improve it? So the bodies of work that inform this study is first learning to notice children's thinking. Not necessarily starting with, I'm going to expect kids to say this, and so if you say something outside of that, then I'm not really sure what to do, but to just learn to notice the wide variety of ideas that they bring. Being responsive to children's ideas is also a really challenging skill to learn. Now that the kid has shared with you their thinking, in what ways can you then ask them more probing questions that you can, like Jacobs and Ambrose talk about, the supporting, extending, and clarifying questions. And then also using video clips to support pre-service teachers' thinking, because we know that not every video clip is the same. We know that some video clip affords certain pedagogical strategies than others. And then also to be very careful with the selection and the use of those video clips. Don't just throw up a video clip and say, all right, that's CGI, and then you keep moving on. But that there's strategic moments that you can pause the video clip to really support their thinking with this idea of being responsive to children's ideas. I don't know if y'all are curious. That's my playlist. So I went ahead and highlighted it in, which is something that I'm now realizing, which is kind of interesting, is that my first 3 videos are from the old videos back in the day, and then the 3 new videos are ones from the newest video clip collection. And I didn't mean for them to be split like that, it just turned out that way. So I have a separate change unknown, a join change unknown, separate result unknown, another separate result unknown. This one though is a child that communicates her thinking completely in Spanish. And because I'm from UTSA and I have some students that are native Spanish speakers, it provides an opportunity for us to think about the ways in which you can still understand and learn about children's thinking, even though maybe some of the other students might not be native Spanish speakers. And then we have Austin. And actually, Austin's going to be the one that we talk about today. Okay, why did I pick Austin? So the reason why I picked Austin is because there's actually 3 videos of him. Let me just go ahead and stop. Who in here uses the CGI video clips, either of the classic edition or the more updated edition? Yeah, okay. So you can access these video clips on the book, buy the book. They've got the little link to them. The reason why I picked Austin for this presentation is because there's 3 successive video clips where he does a multiplication problem and then 2 division problems. And if you play them in order, I'm not going to play all 3 of them because I don't have time, but I'll just play 2 of them. You can kind of see connections to his thinking, and also because Austin does a really interesting job of exercising his rights of the learner, even though that's never actually stated in the videos. And because Austin was on my playlist, so I'm going to show you Austin. So Austin solves the multiplication problem, and it says a measurement division problem, but I went ahead and took that off, so we're just going to focus on the multiplication problem right now. 3 packs of gum, 6 pieces in each pack. How many pieces are there altogether? So what I'll let you do is just take like a minute to think about how you think a child might solve that problem in 2 different ways. And just because we have a ton of red paper that's in my office supply cabinet, you get the transcript on the red paper. I'm sorry, it's a little like bright, but I went ahead and printed out the transcript for you as well. So just for right now, think about different ways that a child might solve this problem before you read his strategy. All right, so let's pause. I did kind of lie. I do have a hand signal, but I learned it a long time ago at Silent Fox. And sometimes I do it at my house with my spouse when we're having like disagreements, and I'm like, no, Crystal, not a good time to use Silent Fox. Can somebody just tell me one way in which they might think about a child solving this problem?
Draw a picture,
What kind of a picture would you imagine them drawing?
3 circles for the packs, and then put 6 sticks inside and then count them up.
Okay. Anybody else?
Addition.
In what way?
6 plus 6 plus 6.
Okay. Is there another way? Who has seen the Austin video before? You didn't have to see it beforehand. If you've seen it beforehand, it's no big deal. I was just curious. I saw Dr. Diamond just like, I had to because Craig made me. All right, so here's Austin with his first problem.
Has 3 packages of gum. There are 6 pieces of gum in each package. How many pieces of gum does Robin have?
He has 6 packages.
He has 3 packages of gum, and there are 6 pieces of gum in each package. How many pieces of gum does Robin have altogether? How'd you get 18?
I used my fingers and I knew we had 6 for the first box. So I went 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I had 12 for 2 packages. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And he had 18 for the third package.
Okay. You know, I don't see you using your fingers. Are you wiggling them down here underneath the table? What are you doing? How are you keeping track when you first started?
I'm doing them under the table so that no one sees it.
It's okay, you could show them the first time, but your explanation was great.
Okay, I want you to turn to the person next to you. What did you see in that video? And remember, you've got the transcript in front of you if you need to refer to it.
Sure. Counting on.
And then you decide to share
also wonder how he knew that he could but he's still young, a lot of still
Okay, let's take a pause. What did one person notice? It could be anything. You're gonna make me work hard for this presentation. No, I gotcha. Yes.
He's afraid to use his fingers, like there's an expectation that using your fingers to count is better.
And what did you see in the video that gave you that impression?
I mean, he said he was hiding his fingers, but then he also like whispered, like as if he didn't want even the camera to hear him, like I don't want people to see him.
But he still did it because he knew that he could get the right answer that way.
And then he eventually put his hands up.
And when he did it, he was like keeping track of the tens with his two, and then using the extra one to
Talk to me more
count
about
for
that.
the six. Because he counted on, he had the first six, and then he kept his thumb up, and then when he got the second six, he put his finger up and always used his pinky to do the sixth piece of gum in the pack.
He was keeping track of the number of groups in one hand, the number of groups in one hand, and then the number in each group with the other hand at the same time. Which is why I find like playing piano super, super hard, because you've got to keep track of two hands at the same time. Like Craig can just do one hand. But so he was doing both of those at the same time, which is really sophisticated thinking.
And did he end up with silent fox or?
I don't know. I don't even know if I do silent fox correctly, but that's neither here nor there. So now I want you to watch the video again. And I put little strips out there so that you would see the rights of the learner. If you can just pass them down, put them at the end of the table. I want you to try to see if you can notice moments in which he's exercising his rights of the learner as he's communicating his thinking. And I might not have made enough, so I apologize.
We can share.
Okay, perfect. There's only 4 of them for right now.
Ed had 50. Hey, bud.
Pieces of gum in each package. How many pieces of gum does Robin have?
He has 6 packages.
He has 3 packages of gum, and there are 6 pieces of gum in each package. How many pieces of gum does Robin have altogether? How'd you get 18?
I used my fingers and I knew I had 6 for the first box. So I went 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I had 12 for 2 packages. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And I had 18 for the third package.
Okay. You know, I don't see you using your fingers. Are you wiggling them down here underneath the table? What are you doing? How are you keeping track when you first started?
I'm doing them under the table so that no one sees them.
It's okay, you could show them the first time, but you're excellent.
Okay, turn and talk to another person. Maybe it's the person behind you or another person sitting next to you. What rights of the learner did you see Austin exercise?
Why did I feel like I needed to felt that license to use that. I wasn't sure if it was acceptable.
All right, because we have more videos to watch. What was one right that Austin exercised that you saw?
Right, go ahead to represent what makes sense to you.
Okay, and in what ways did you see that?
Like wiggling his finger on the
Yep, these are the best calculator and manipulatives out there. I still use them all the time. Yep. And he didn't just say like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, two values. But he like had them, he was again keeping track of the number of groups and the number of in each group at the same time. Which I emphasize to my pre-service teachers, like, that's super sophisticated. And to notice that sophistication in what Austin's saying and thinking and representing is really important in helping to develop pre-service teachers noticing skills for that being really sophisticated. Even if you would have just counted up with the speakers, that was also something really good to notice. What else did you all notice?
He said it wasn't necessarily the right to be confused, but the right to ask for clarification at the beginning. Before he dove into a strategy, he wanted to be sure he understood what the question was.
And sometimes you can pick up on that in terms of the inflection in the students, like, can you say that again? 18? Yep. Students don't necessarily always have to say, I don't get it, for them to be able to express some type of curiosity or question. In every case, do we always have to exercise all of our rights of the learners all the time? Not all the time, which is another reason why the CGI playlist is really important for me, because certain videos highlight certain things. So for this video, for me, it highlights that fourth right, to represent with fingers. It doesn't always have to have all four of the rights at the same time, but it really highlights that notion of interrupting the assumption that kids can't use their fingers, and that kids bring with them experiences where they're embarrassed to use their fingers. And we as math teachers need to help them to be able to see that these are some of the best tools out there. Okay, here's the second Austin video. So he's got 24 jelly beans in a bag, and 4 children want to share them so that each child gets the same amount. The question is, how many jelly beans does each child get? 24 jelly beans in a bag, each child, there's 4 kids, so that each child gets the same amount. How many jelly beans does each child get? So think to yourself, maybe for 30 seconds, how you think a child might solve that problem in 2 different ways. Now remember, you've already seen Austin. So he might do a similar strategy, might do something different. right, how do you think a child might solve this problem? 24 jelly beans shared with 4 kids.
I can do a halving strategy, so 24 jelly beans for 4 kids, half of that 12 jelly beans for 2 kids, half of that 6 jelly beans for 1.
Nice. Anybody else?
I think kids might start distributing 1 for each, then 2 for each, then 3, until all the 24 are distributed, and then count how many there are.
You got a jelly bean, you got a jelly bean, you got a jelly bean. Okay, would you?
I think I was thinking the same thing, but maybe continuation of the same grouping method with fingers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so using what you've already seen in the previous awesome video to maybe have a similar strategy? Okay. Big reveal. But is it really? Yes, okay. Whew. So this one's a longer video, so I don't think I'll have enough time to play it twice. So you've got the transcript in front of you. You've also got the transcript down here as the closed captions. And then if, as you're watching this video, if now you can attend to the ways in which Austin might be exercising his rights as the learner.
Beans in a bag. 4 children want to share them, so they each get the same amount of jelly beans. How many jelly beans would each child get?
Four.
How'd you get 4?
Well, I went 4, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Was it counting my twos?
Yes.
And I guess I got it wrong.
So let me read it one more time. There are 24 jelly beans in a bag, and 4 children want to share them, so they each get the same amount of jelly beans. How many jelly beans would each child get?
Mm. Seven?
What do you think it might be, 7?
Well, the reason I thought it was 7 was because I counted these, and I was thinking that since this row had 7, the rest had 7, but maybe not.
Okay, is there any way you could check that? Since you're not sure.
It's not right.
So it's usually where I take a pause with the video and I ask my pre-service teachers, like, he's already expressed his confusion multiple times. What would you say next to Austin? So it's what Amani Goffney calls one of those strategic pauses, where it's like, I'm gonna go ahead and suspend this in time right now because we can do that. And this is not like a live classroom where there's a kid actually in front of us. So turn to the person next to you. What would be the next thing that you would say to Austin after all of the mathematical thinking that he's communicated to you?
What do you think?
I would probably say, why did you ask? Or why are you here? And is there a way that?
And he said that 7 is wrong. I think that's not
Is there a way to think about it?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. Like, how do you go? It's not. And That's a really good point, that that's part of the problem. She's studying a lot of like argumentation, and she's starting to figure out like questions and series of questions, which I think often kind of gets like that. I don't know, you were saying as first said, why is 7 wrong? And then he says, what? Then, what did you say?
All right, I'm going to pause us. Let's watch what happens with the rest of the video.
Maybe I just didn't put enough. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll put numbers in. Yep, I have 24. Six.
How'd you get 6?
I went with my fingers. I know I had 6 for one child, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 for the second, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 for the third, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 for the fourth.
So how did you know to start with 6?
It was kind of like the problem where I started with 5, but I started, this time I started with 4, and I did 5, and I did 3, and I did 2, and I'm like, it can't be 1, that'd be 4, and there's 24. So I tried doing 6, and I figured out that it was 6.
Okay, nice work.
All right, one last time, turn and talk to the person next to you. What did you notice in the video about Austin exercising his rights as a learner?
Yeah, and then I was mistake. Okay, how do you know it wasn't 7 rather than focusing on the mistake? She asked, is there any way you can check that to be sure? Like, maybe it was a mistake, maybe it wasn't. I'm gonna allow your claiming of the mistake to And he definitely did the right to and represent what makes sense to him, because he like counted with all the numbers in there. He just validated that it was 24. He was confused for what was making sense.
All right, so I only have a couple more minutes left and only a few more slides left, so let's go ahead and take a pause. What did somebody notice in this video about Austin exercising his right as the learner? Were there ways in which he exercised his right to be confused? So I see some head shaking. Can you tell me more? What about the video signaled that he was exercising his right to be confused? Yeah.
When he drew out his, the smaller jelly beans, it was like, there's supposed to be 7 in each row, but there's not. Let me do it again. So, end of sentence.
Which in some ways we can consider that to be engaging in that notion of productive struggle. I'm not just perseverance, so I'm not just going to give up and go, oh, 7? Is that what you want to hear? Did anybody expect that strategy out of Austin? Where you just said 6? You're like, well, where did the 6 come from? Like magic. Did you notice what he was doing with one of his hands underneath the table again? He was counting again with his hands underneath the table. So even though the interviewer had said, it's okay, use your hands, he still reverted back to like keeping them in. And then finally, whenever he did count, what did you notice about him using his fingers that was different than the first video? What did you say?
He wasn't keeping track of the number of groups.
Yeah, he just kept going like, I have 1 group, 2 groups. And I was like, just, you put it, what happened to this? He was like, no, I got this in my head. And he noticed that he was like, well, it didn't work for, I started with 5 and that didn't work. So then I systematically went down, like, well, it can't be 1. And then he finally went, well, 1 more than 5 is 6, so I'm gonna try 6. So that was Austin's right in order to go ahead and approach the problem in that particular way. Was it what we might typically see students do where it's like 24, I'm gonna draw 4 circles and then I'm gonna fair share them out. That's what we might typically see, but that's not how Austin approached it. So that's why I pair those 2 videos up, because it's really important for pre-service teachers to be able to see some continuity in their thinking, even though it might not necessarily be what we expect. So if you get a chance, if you have the videos, you might also watch that has 15 ladybugs. He puts 3 ladybugs in each jar. We don't have enough time, but it's another good video to go ahead and have as a sequential way in order to see Austin's thinking across, which really connects to one of the core practices that I have in my class, which is doing case studies of students thinking using the CGI problems. So a lot of times the students, they go, all right, I'm just going to give them all these problem-solving interviews. And when Dr. Craig asks me, like, how am I going to look across as a thread, I've built this in now, as Austin is one of those practicing threads that we can say, you've seen Austin in these 3 videos. What do you know about his mathematical thinking as an arch across? And it's not just consolidated within one particular video about one specific mathematical skill or concept. So what we know about the playlist, we can't fit everything on the playlist. We can't just hit Amazon, buy. You have to be really judicious about the videos that we show. And so that's why I hope that I presented the reasons why I picked Austin to go ahead and show not only multiplication, but also part of the division, to then also show the ways in which he was exercising his rights as a learner without explicitly saying, you have a right of a learner. So what I learned from the playlist process by sharing my playlist with Dr. Diamond and Dr. Shi was that I kind of needed a scaffold. Not kind of, I did. I needed a scaffold for my pre-service teachers. Because before, I would just throw the videos up and say, what do you see? What do you notice? Do you see that he was confused? Cool, let's move on. And they were like, what? So with this scaffold, we now take a pause beforehand and we say, let's analyze this task first. What's the problem type? Is it join, separate? Is it start, change, result unknown? If you were to write a number sentence, what would that look like? let's go ahead and do a prediction as to how a child might solve that. And then in what ways does Austin actually solve that problem that's presented? And then what rights of the learners do you notice? And by scaffolding the learning for them, they're able to have more access and entry points to some pretty sophisticated thinking using two hands. So to go back to those three things that I talked about before, the scaffold helps support my students to notice aspects about the problem that they might have not necessarily noticed before. Thinking about the big mathematical idea of these tasks. We also pair this up with it was smart when statements. So we're basing this off of Jilk's piece out of MTE in 2016 that says it was smart when Austin solved a partitive division problem using trial and error, because that's another way in which they can solve a problem that's not necessarily what we might have expected. And so by emphasizing student strengths, we then can promote students' rights of the learner, and we can interrupt those issues of inequity that are happening in the classroom. And by helping students like Austin and others to know that they've got lots of mathematical thinking and strengths, then using their fingers shouldn't be seen as something that they need to avoid. So am I suggesting that the rights of the learner are suddenly going to go ahead and change tons of inequities that are happening in classrooms, and that it's going to no longer going to have systems or systemic oppression? No, this is not magic. This is just one tiny little entry point into changing the ways in which our students engage in mathematics, but it could be a way that we adopt a more equitable stance with our students. So the rights of the learner aren't just for elementary students, they're not just for our pre-service teachers. I use this with my teachers whenever I go out and do professional development, and I give them a really challenging task, and they go, what? I don't know. I'm like, cool, you're using your right of the learner, and they're like, what is that? I have no idea what she's talking about. And that gives them an entry point into talking about it. We talk about it with parents. I talk about it with my middle school students, my college students. And so now we can go on and we can exercise all of our rights. Is this an old meme? Is this a new meme? We're getting weird looks. Okay. So here's my contact information, my email address. If you want to keep up with the rights of the learner, I also have a blog right here. I'm a Lady Gaga on my way out of this because this is the end of my presentation, but I really appreciate you all coming to it. Thank you.
We're going to open the floor for questions. Feel free to exercise your right to learn. There you go. There you go.
I know some of these CGI videos, probably like 40% are classroom videos. Have you used the classroom videos to do roughly the same thing, and then was there any difference? Because I can see, like, obviously, probably Austin might, exercise his rights of learning because he's the only one, there's no social risk in doing any of this stuff. So how does it, if you've done it with the classroom videos, how does it usually go?
Yep, so that was one of the videos that we talked about in our first paper where it was Miss Yatri. And it was 6 sharks are swimming, 5 more join them. How many sharks are there all together? And they're in a large circle with kinder students. And one kid pulls out a domino and says, well, I see a 5 here and a 6 here, and so I just add them all up. Another one uses a pegboard. Another child says, well, I have 6, and I know that I only have 4, but I need 5, so I know that 1 more is 11. So there's ways in which I use that dynamic to be able to show lots of different strategies. But the ways in which we can see it in more of a natural setting, I think is going to be the next stage. Because I do that whenever they do group-worthy tasks as pre-service teachers, but I don't yet I think we need to build our video clip collection of students actually working in groups and exercising those rights, and then also positioning each other to not exercise their rights, where they kind of shut each other down. So I think there's a whole lot more opportunities to think about this in more, like, less constrained ways of a child sitting there with blocks and a piece of paper. But yeah, really good point.
So how do your pre-service teachers react to this whole idea of rights of the learner? Do they buy in, both feet in, ready to go? Is there resistance? Does it take them a while to come around to it?
There's size of relief. it's really interesting. So I have them write a math autobiography. And this has kind of shifted over the years, where whenever I first started teaching at Arizona as a doc student, nearly all of my math autobiographies were, I hate math, I don't want to do this, I'm terrified, my teacher told me that I wasn't very good at it, so all I want to do is teach reading. And now, over the years, and I don't know if it's like the direction that we're going, or maybe it's just my particular collection of students, but a lot of them come in very confident in mathematics. And so,
Texas standards.
they're also confident about other things too. But so now whenever I talk about, I give them a task in the very beginning where I know it is a high ceiling, low floor task where there's lots of entry points. And I will start to figure out, you're the type of person that's going to gravitate towards the algorithm. You're the type of person that might gravitate towards the blocks or something that's more concrete. And for me to start to say that we had the right to be able to solve that problem in as many different ways, it's almost like a sigh of relief, like, oh, okay, I know I'm in an elementary math ed classroom, and I really want to use the algorithm, but I have this feeling she wants me to use the blocks because the blocks are out on the table. It's this moment where they kind of feel that there's the space for them to communicate their thinking, and that I'm not necessarily applying this one particular expectation on them. But that's also really hard for me because I know the tasks that I give them, and so I'm like, I know that you're going to do that, okay, give them the right alarm, great. And I will try to have the best poker straight face that I can, and I'll walk up and I'm like, oh, can you tell me more of your thinking? And they're like, oh my God, I got it wrong, oh my God, she thinks I'm an idiot. I'm like, oh, let's take a time out. And so there's still those historical residues of the norms of schooling that are present that takes years to unpack. And so this, I know, is just like one little tiny drop in the bucket that we can do, but I've had students write to me, like, I saw my students use the rights of the learner in their field work, and it was pretty amazing and cool because now my cooperating teacher wants to take that up, and she wants to go ahead and put it up in her classroom. Yes. It's one tiny little step towards that direction. But it's complicated, I guess is the
That was like my next question. How are they able to kind of recontextualize that out in their field experience, this right of the learner? Is it pretty easy shift for them, or is it?
No, because there's always that tension, right? This is the space that Craig operates within, where she has lots of cat memes, lots of gifts, that doesn't get any reaction, but that's cool. I'm gonna go back and revise my thinking. I have that right to claim that moment. But that's a lot of times what I hear whenever they say, okay, I have the right of learner, my students have the right of learner, and then they might step into a space in which that cooperating teacher might not necessarily be there, and they'll come back to me and they'll say, Craig, kids didn't have the right to make a mistake. Like, it was very much, you are right, you are wrong, convergent formative assessment. And I'm like, what an amazing opportunity. What if, and my students hate it whenever I start with that, because they're like, oh, they're gonna make me want to like ask questions. Yeah, it's a cool opportunity. What if you were to ask your cooperating teacher, like, I wonder if maybe we can come up with a group-worthy task where there's multiple opportunities for kids to share their solutions. Or what if we had kids in which we gave them a problem and maybe there was a wrong answer, but that I could then change the problem so where that wrong answer became right. And so that, I think, is creating that space for them to be able to exercise their opportunities and their rights as learners of teachers. Or learners of being mathematics teachers, that then provides them a little bit more agency for whenever they go into those situations where it doesn't seem the way that they had expected it to. But that's also really complicated, because they're like, well, I don't feel like I have the space to be able to tell the teacher, like, don't you use divergent formative assessment? And the cooperating teacher's like, who are you? I'm telling you what to do. So there's a lot of power and dynamics that are at play, and it takes. And I know that it takes a really long time for them to be able to step into that space, to be able to create those moments for kids to be able to exercise that. That's a really good question, because we know classrooms are dynamic and it's not always going to be a perfect situation like what we see on the videos.
Well, if you would join me in giving her a round of applause. Thank you so much.